Jess claims he has a Job question. I sent him there he is. So, what is this Job question of thine, my dear friend?
Hi, can you hear me?
I can. Let me get my drink, just a second.
Yeah.
I am now ready.
All right. So, I was going through Job 41. So this is where God's talking about Leviathan.
Okay.
And I had a question with the Hebrew there. And in my Bible, it is, let's see, it's Job 41, verse 9. But I think on Sepharia, it's 41, 1.
41:1 is, behold, the hope of him is in vain. Shall not one be cast down even at the sight of him? Is that the one?
Yep.
Okay.
That's the one.
I'm surprised that it would be that far away because usually the verses are only one or two away from each other. But okay, so hen tochalti nechsava v'gam el marav yutol. Hen tochalti. Tochalto nechzava hagam el marav yutal. Job is very, very poetic, and so
I feel like this is one of those verses that can be translated at least two ways. That would have different effect.
Let me pull this up on Bible Hub.
Okay. And it's 41.9 on Bible Hub.
Yeah. This works. Okay. So let's see what the King James is saying. King James says, "Behold, the hope of him is in vain. Shall not one be cast down even at the sight of him? Any hope of subduing it is false. The mere sight of it is overpowering." New Living Translation. "No, it is useless to try to capture it. The hunter who attempts it will be knocked down." Wow. Let me go.
Well, in the last Hebrew word on Bible Hub, says in the Strongs, it says to pitch over, to reel, to cast down.
Ooh. So Yutal. So they're saying from Taf Vav Lamed to hurl or cast. Be extended. Yutal in Psalm 37:24.
Hurled headlong.
Yipol lo yutal ki Hashem somech yado. So the question becomes, what is the root? And tet, so they're saying it's tet vav lamed. So you know what? Let me check Ben's book. Ben, find Ben's book. Where did sent Ben's book to somebody in a link? Person was Roman, and there's Ben's book on Hebrew roots. The link here, in case anybody wants to look at Ben's book. Now, Ben has written this book in which he tries to identify roots, and I tend to agree with him. Let me see if he has Job anywhere in there. So Job 41. That's the only place where he has it. So he hasn't gone through the entirety of the Bible. So, okay. To explain Hebrew radicals, in Hebrew, words have three radicals, which are three consonants, and they tell you what the essence of the word is. And actually, the form here is pretty clear. It's in the Hofal. It's in what's called the passive causative, right? So, for example, if you want to say something was dictated, right, you would use the root to write, and you would use the passive causative and say that it was huchtav, it was yuchtav, right? It was written, right? It was dictated, sorry, not written, because somebody caused somebody else to write it. Now, the question becomes what the root here is, because we only see two roots, and that happens in Hebrew because there are what are called weak radicals. And there's an argument to be made that, in fact, the two radical thing is a common thing to happen. Now, I can't think of any other place, any other word that I'm very familiar with which has these two roots, tet and lamed, right next to each other. Isaiah 22:17. So this is going to be really interesting. So because it's actually using stems. So there are rare stems that only use 2 out of 3. So they're two root stems. Hine Hashem metaltelecha taltela gavar. Oh, and talit is also, I would say, from the same root. Gavar ve'otcha ata.
2:17.
Yeah, Isaiah 22:17. Indeed, the Lord will throw you away violently. Yeah, I would say this is the verse in which you get the clearest indication of how this word is being used. So hen tochalto nichzava hagam el marav utal. I mean, obviously, it's saying that it's completely impossible to wrestle with this thing, right? Tochalto, like literally, the root is to start or to, well, it can also mean to try. Expectation, hope is right. Wait, okay, I guess, yeah. Hen tochalto, surely it's a false hope. Hagam el marav. Thing is, again, it's like when you're talking about, hey, Ben's here. Hey, thing. But Ben's here. Hey, Ben, your expert opinion is definitely requested. So we're doing Job 41:9 in the Christian Bibles, which happens to be. I'm really shocked that the numbering is that far off. I don't remember.
Yeah, at the end of Job, it gets really far off.
But it says hen tochalto nechzava. Well, what's the previous verse? Sim alav kapecha zachor milchama al tosav. And this is, so you're saying it's talking about hatmale besukot oro uvtziltzal dagim rosho. Ru alav chavarav ichatzud bein כנענים. התחזק בו כציפור. היכולות ברית עמך. ירבה עליך but I'm just trying to find where the it, which is so the Leviathan. So Timshoch Leviathan bechaka uvchevel tashkia l'shono. Why aren't I doing this in Safaria like I should be?
You have to go back.
Yeah. So. Ken Yashok Nahar Lo Nahar
25.
Yeah. Timshoch Leviathan Bechaka Uvchavel Tashkia Lashono Hatasim Agmon Ba'apo. What were you thinking? Like why did this capture your attention?
Well, I was trying to get I don't know exactly. It struck me as I was going through this section for the billionth time. Well, because in my Bible, in the ESV version that I have, which is not great all the time, in verse 9 it says, "Behold, the hope of man is false. He is laid low even at the sight of him. No one is so fierce that he dares stir him up. Who then is he who can stand before me?" So it, but when I looked at the Hebrew in verse 9, it wasn't so clear that it was talking about the hope of man necessarily, and I couldn't make heads or tails of it. And I was going to ask you about it because it seems like it says something like the hope is false, and then at his sight, one would be cast out or something like that. But
right. So I mean, you have to understand. I mean, when we take a more symbological view, and while I love your opinion, Chad, your opinion on the Hebrew is not as learned as that of Ben's. Ben knows his Hebrew very well, in some ways better than I do. So let me just explain the symbology, which for me puts this into place, which is the Leviathan, right, is in many ways a hey Shari, if you want to come on, you're welcome.
Hey Sherry.
Sherry, I keep on saying Shari. Let me send.
It's all right. It sounds more ethnic or something.
The thing is, I always see her name. I don't actually talk to her as much as we used to, so it's like I'm always see the A and it throws me off. Okay, so Sherry, I sent you a link. Well, I was wondering about the roots, Ben. Yes, this is the Ben who wrote the Counting Roots book. Awesome. Can I keep my camera off? Yes, because I know you. You can keep your camera off. Where were we saying? I was more confused by the roots here, Tohalto and Utal. But what was I saying? Okay, so let's talk about creation in general, right? So we have Alma the Emet, right? We have the world of truth, which is reality as it actually is. And then we have Alma the Shikra, which is the world, so the world of truth is the spiritual world, and the the world of sheker, of lies, is the physical world. Okay, and so and I mean, in Christian terms, you would say that, so there's the ideal, right, and then there's the or ousia, right, the essence, and then there are the hypostases, right. There's how things in this hypostatic reality exist, which is removed from the ideal. Okay.
Mhm.
Now, the concept of the Leviathan, or the Leviathan, right,
Yeah.
is that it is the embodiment of it is that which is most physical, right? That which is most material. And what's going to happen when Mashiach comes is God is going to slaughter the Leviathan, and we are
Right.
going to have we are going to feast on its body. Okay. And that is an analogy to how it reminded me. Yay, hey Sherry. She's not turning her camera
Sure.
on because she doesn't love us. It reminded me of Tal, as in dew, as well. Although I wasn't sure what to make of that. But although I guess, I mean, you could say Tal and Geshem again is Geshem Gashmiut, right? So Tal is dew, Geshem is rain, and Gashmiut, or the quality of rain, is actually materiality, right? So what so Jewish theology here is that we were put in this world, in this material world, this Alma de Shikra, right? But eventually, when the veil parts and we are able to see the truth, right,
Mhm.
we will actually see that the material was a nourishment, was something there to in fact allow us all the great things that God wants to give to us. And that's why the feast, right, actually, if I'm remembering correctly, actually the sukkah, there's going to be like a feast hall made from the skin of the Leviathan, or maybe something else.
Yeah.
I forget what it was. And then there's going to be the feast on the Leviathan and the but so
Well,
when
I think even verse 7 there, I think it's in Safari like that.
verse
Oh no, I was reading
7,
which is on Safari it's 40:31.
40:31. Okay.
Where is
Hatamale
it?
besukot. Right, oro uvtilsa. Yeah,
Would you,
that's
yeah,
interesting. That's a very interesting
it's the 10th
use of Sukkot
reference.
there. Yeah. Although it's with a sin and not a samech. That's so interesting. So these words here, hen tochalto nichzava, right? Like it says in Psalm, kol adam kozev, right? Every human Kol Adam Kozev. Where's Kol Adam Kozev? Let me find Kol Adam Kozev. I know it's from the Psalms, but I forget. On why is that this?
Yeah, because there's all that, I don't know what it's called, but there's all that Jewish mythology about how God first made the two Leviathans, then in order so that they didn't like procreate and destroy everything, he killed one, and then the other will be killed when the Messiah comes or something. and then there'll be the feast, and like they'll the tents will be made out of its skin. I even think I read something about part of its skin will be draped over the walls of Jerusalem or something.
Yeah, so I mean, I am not that familiar with this stuff.
Okay. I just read about it, so
yeah.
I'm not familiar with it either.
So
But
what I was
curious
thinking
if you
of
knew.
is Psalms 116:11, which says, Ani amarti bechofzi kol ha'adam kozev. I said in my haste, every man is false. But this idea of kol ha'adam kozev, right? That all that is man is kozev. Really, I mean, it's a verb. So it's a verb to imagine falsely, to think, to be deluded, right? And it's funny that we don't actually have a verb in English like kozev. Like, I'm trying to think if we have a verb of what, hallucinate, maybe. Yeah. So kozev, I guess maybe you could translate it as hallucinate, right?
Every man is like a hallucination.
No, every man hallucinates.
Oh, every man hallucinates.
Yes. So hen tochalto nechzava, right? So
Jacob,
yeah, yes.
I'm just wondering, could it be imagination?
I think, yeah, I think so. Yeah. So
is it a negative connotation or a positive connotation or neutral?
No, it's negative. It's definitely
negative.
It's the nichzava, right? Kozev is definitely negative. And so it's saying, like, even these things, what we understand of it, like the image of it, the all of these are mirages and illusions which throw you off.
And that's what you're saying Leviathan in the physical world is, right?
Yeah, it's the Alma de Shikra, right? So the world in which we now live before the veil is taken away is a world of not seeing things as they truly are. And when Mashiach comes, right? So God is going to shecht the Leviathan. He's going to slaughter the Leviathan, and its skin is going to become a shelter, a feast hall, and its meat is going to become a feast for us in our celebration with God, in looking back. And this is actually an imagery I thought I almost made a video about this, about the imagery of front and back, because in the Hebrew, this imagery of the front of God and the back of God is like, it's all over the place, but it doesn't really translate to English at all, right? And so there is that there's that part where it's talking about Moses, right? Moses says, I want to see your face. And God says to him, no man can see my face and live. So I will put you in a cave. I will put my hand over you. I will pass by you, and you will see me from the back, right? So the concept in Judaism is that the difference between good and bad is whether it comes from God's face or God's back, okay? And where we are, we cannot see God's face, because if you see God's face, you don't live, in that you can't have free choice. You have free choice because we have the ability to choose good over bad, because we don't sense how the bad is actually, that God, even the bad, God is doing it for our good. But we can't understand that, and we need to not understand that in order for us to choose the good, okay? And what happens is, eventually God will turn his face towards us, and just as you can, once you're seeing what somebody's doing in front of them, you can clearly see what's going on, as opposed to seeing from the back, right?
I
Then we
heard it
will
explained.
clearly understand.
I heard it explained once that when God said, "You'll see me from my back," that you'll see me, you'll see what I leave in my wake, or you'll see what happens when, like, it's almost like as God passes, every things happen, and you get to see all that. You don't get to see my face.
Directly, you don't get to see directly, correct? But like the priestly prayer, is which I've been thinking about a lot lately. The priestly prayer, it's all, let me pull up the priestly prayer actually. Do you remember what verse it is? Priestly blessing. It's in Numbers, I'm pretty sure. Let me find it. Priestly blessing. Now, archaeologically, this may in fact be the oldest. So Leviticus 9:22 and Deuteronomy 10:8 and 21:5 mention Aaron or other priests blessing the Israelites. The text to be used for the blessing is specified in Numbers 6:24 through 26. So let me pull it up. But so archaeologically, this is like the oldest fragment we've ever been able to find. And so this has been, and I would say in a very real way, 624, in a very real sense, I would say that this is reflected throughout the rest of the Bible. So I'll read it in Hebrew and then I'll read it in English. Yevarechecha Adonai ve'yishmerecha, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka, Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. The Lord bless thee and keep thee. The Lord make his face shine upon thee and be gracious to thee. The Lord lift up his countenance to thee and give thee peace. Right? So this is the hope. The hope is that we will eventually see God's face, right? And obviously God doesn't have a face, and God doesn't have a back. But and the word face in Hebrew actually also means inside, and it means to turn, right? And so this image, like the imagery is all over the Bible in the Hebrew, of face and back, God's face, other people's faces, things which are facing you or before you, like that. It's all over the place. And so the hope is of seeing the actuality, the inside, the face of God. But right now we live in we live in Alma de Shikra, in a place where we are only seeing God from the back. So Ben says, I like the definition of lie for Kozev, like an intentional harm. Oof. I don't know if that's, I guess there are places where Kozev is actually, it is used as to lie. I would have to look. Does God want good or the choice of good? Good question. That's actually an excellent question. But if God just wanted good without us choosing good, then he could have just created only good, right? But what God actually wants is the greatest good. So this is one of the things that the Kabbalists teach, is God by his nature wants, his very nature is love, right? And the Hebrew word love, ahava, right, has within it the root hav, which means to give, right? So loving and giving are integrally combined in Judaism. And it was the nature of God to give in the greatest way that it is possible to give. And the greatest loving kindness and giving, right, is to give to that which is in no way deserving, but by giving it the opportunity to earn, as opposed to just giving it without that opportunity to earn, right? You teach a man to fish, you don't just give him the fish. Even if you had infinite fishes, it's not just a practical thing. It's about giving in the best way. So the greatest form of charity, right? Maimonides says the greatest form of charity is actually when you have no idea who you're giving to, and the person who's receiving has no idea that he's actually receiving, right? And so giving the opportunity for us to choose, and that's why Deuteronomy 30, right? It says, I call the heavens and the earth as witnesses against you that I have set before you good and evil, life and death. Choose good, right? And so Chad says, can God not have what God wants? God will in fact have what he wants, and that's what the universalist argument is. But I think the universalist argument takes it too far. But indeed, God will have, and so when he created the world, he said he saw that it was good, right? So God knows that in fact he will get what he wants from the world, which is that we will choose life, we will become better and sanctified, right? Can God be denied through or our limitation? Well, in a sense, yes. I mean, that this is the idea of the breaking. Chad, if you want to have a discussion, I'm going to send you a link, and you're just going to have to come on.
Chad's distracting from my questions, though.
Yeah, Chad.
Jeez, the nerve. I don't know. I actually don't know if I have any further questions. I was curious to just hear what you would say about any of that, and if anything struck kind of, because when I was reading through that, I was thinking about some ideas that could be possibilities, but I don't know.
Ben
because
says, a friend once told me you can do it God's way or you can do it God's way.
Because the mythology about Leviathan and about what is it, the Messiah that's going to kill Leviathan, or is it God?
No, it's God. Yeah, God
It's
is
God
because the Messiah is a human being. It's not possible like to shecht the Leviathan. Like the Leviathan's way too big for a human being to do that.
Right.
Yeah. So it's like, I mean, when you're talking about the Jewish Messiah, you're there's Chad.
Sorry, I didn't mean to disrupt.
We can barely hear you, Chad.
Oh, that's a shock.
Now it's better.
Hey, Chad.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
We will never forgive you ever.
I just need you, Jacob, to become an expert on the Book of Job, the Hebrew and the Book of Job. That would be nice for me.
Honestly, like it's a very poetic book, and I've never really had a draw to the poetic that much myself. Like I'm sure you've talked to Yosef about this a lot more, and I would say Yosef and Chezi are probably much better sources than I am.
Yeah, I'm gonna hit him up too, but I was curious what you would say.
Yeah. Chezi is very, very busy, but he's also
I don't think I know him. Is he on the Discord?
He is. He is on the Discord. He comes on every once in a while. He's very responsive, but he's on Israeli time, and
Oh.
he's a world famous designer and architect and stuff. And like,
Oh,
so yeah, you have to catch him while he's like not in Milan, that type of thing.
is he on yours or is it?
No,
BOM?
he's on both, but he's he's on BOM. He comes on into the voice chat on BOM every once in a while. He was on PBK's channel. Like, he's this weird Israeli rabbi slash architect slash designer who listens to Paul Vanderklay.
Sounds awesome.
He is.
Well, if he's listening, hit me up. Send me a DM.
He's
on
one
a
of
couple of live streams.
he doesn't have time for my channel, but he's one of the two official rabbis of my server, him and Yosef.
Nice.
So yeah,
All right, I'll hit up Yosef, and thanks for talking with me, Jacob.
my pleasure.
Well, I gotta go now, Chad. Why? Do you want to talk?
I don't know. I like talking with you guys. I don't have anything to say. only when I get to interrupt. Is when I have
Well,
something to say.
let me just tell you about my. Well, I can't say it. I can't even
Why
talk
can't you
clearly
say
about
it?
it. Well, because
you're
I
gonna start crying again.
no, I won't start crying, but it's just half. It's a half-formed idea that's probably. Okay, so there's
By the
a way. in which-
every time you start crying, I start crying.
No, Jacob, we have a heart connection. This is a little bit more. I won't get choked up, but like how God, in the beginning of the book of Job, when he initiates this conversation with Satan and says, "Here's, have you thought of my servant Job?" Like
Mhm.
God is kind of initiating. He's instigating, is the word I like to use.
Mhm.
And you're like, what is God up to? And it seems like at the end, when God's bringing up Leviathan, like Leviathan had been brought up by Job before in chapter 3, but then God is bringing up Leviathan again to make up a significant part of his speech, and it's almost like he's inviting Job to imagine when Leviathan does get drawn out with a fish hook, when his tongue gets pushed down with a cord, when his rope is through the nose, and when his jaws, these are all things that fishermen would do to catch and get a giant fish on board their ship and drag it into harbor and then butcher it. I'm assuming that this is where the Jewish myths concerning the kind of the end of days and how Leviathan will be caught and butchered and stuff. I'm assuming this is where all this comes from. But God's speaking all in questions. So he's not. But it's almost like he's inviting Job to imagine this possibility, and yet it I'll read out of my Bible here. But it says in like verse 8, like, lay your hands on him, remember the battle, you will not do it again. Like my first thought was like, you will not do it again because it's successful or because it failed.
Neither, because you only have one life to live.
Okay. And then in verse 9 it says, behold, the hope of man is false. He is laid low even at the sight of him. But then when I looked at the Hebrew, which I'm like a preschooler when it comes to like trying to figure out what the Hebrew means, it's not clear like it's what hope is false, or it's said poetically like you're talking about. So it
sounds like it's not full. It's not a full hope. It's not a full vision of hope. It's partial.
Well, and is it referencing the hope of fighting Leviathan, or is it a different hope that is counter to the hope that God is pointing out, that the Leviathan will be caught and crushed and defeated?
Man's hope is
like which hope is
it sounds like man's hope is one that leaves out the Leviathan, and that just isn't how life is.
No, that my thinking is more along the lines of Psalm. I forget which number it is, but
104.
the Lord is my shepherd, right?
Oh.
Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will. And so this world is the valley of the shadow of death, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of this, like Kozev, Sheker, Mar'eh, right? Visions, all of these are. So religion is a path. It's a path. It's not a destination,
Mhm.
right? We're walking towards God, and there are all these false ways we turn, right? And I think that really the idea is you're trying to walk through the darkness, and you're seeing mirages, you're seeing you're and that is the Leviathan, right? The Leviathan is this mirage, this falseness, this materiality, right? And
Mhm.
And it and it's throwing you this way and that way, you're right, but eventually that Leviathan itself is going to be conquered, is going to be slaughtered, and
Mhm.
that is in fact going to be the both the feast hall and the feast, right?
Right.
So
Yeah,
I was
that's
thinking
Yeah,
about
which
that, and like the feast sounds like, wouldn't you feast for nourishment? So that's what I mean. Like
Yeah.
it's not a full vision of hope. The hope that they're talking about here, I think, sounds like one that is. It's not a. It's not a. It's not a well. A full vision of real hope, because real hope, you will have to have the Leviathan as part of it. It's not squeaky clean, and there is nourishment that comes from the pains in life, or the pangs of life, or what you're saying the illusion is, or this false image of, because we think that all the bad is terrible, but when you say look back on any kind of terrible things that have happened in our lives, there is now there's a full vision of hope.
Yeah. Like it says, Shiftecha Mishantecha Hema Yanachamuni, your rod and your staff, they will comfort me. And I saw the word Nachem. You mentioned it in Job. I forget which verse, but it, like the word, like, yeah, indeed, when we look back, right, when the veil is lifted and we look back on the world, then we're going to see that in fact, Shivtecha u'mishantecha hema yanachamuni, your rod and your staff, right? So this is part of the very basic Jewish belief that we Kishem anu mevarchin al hatov mevarchin al hara. In the same way as we thank God for that which is good, we thank Him for that which is bad, which is like, what do you mean, right? But God says, I have created all these things. I have created light and darkness. I have created good and evil, right? And ultimately, that is theodicy, right? That is the whole point of Job, is to understand that the good and the bad come from God, but they exist because ultimately we are now in this Alma de Shikra, in this world of illusion, in this we're not able to see things as we are. And I think that's what this verse is saying, right? So yeah, the mere sight of it is overpowering. I'm not sure I would say mere sight of it. Like the words mar'eh and mar'eh and kozev, right? Nichzava. and even tochalto, right? These are all words of, and even utal, I would say these are words of false vision, of mirages and delusion.
which
Hmm.
are which are misunderstandings, right?
Yeah.
It's a misconception of God, and this is why the seeing only the back of God is really important. Like in that video I watched of the rabbi, I can't remember his name anymore.
Rabbi Breidowitz.
That I asked him about. Yeah,
Yeah, Rabbi Breidowitz.
when he talked
He's an
about-
amazing person, by the way.
yeah, my internet's kind of choppy here, so I hope this is working. But he started his whole talk on Job with those verses, Jacob, with
Yeah.
Moses saying, "Show me your glory," because he said in the Hebrew, essentially what he's saying there is, why do the wicked prosper and why do the righteous suffer? Which is the
Right.
theme of Job, okay? And so this is the glory, right? This is the glory. And so when you think about the Leviathan being the thing that you feast on and that you dwell under, this is a resolution of this conflict, of these dichotomies. That's what it is. It's the front and the back of God, right? And you eat it because it's food for you. It sustains you, right? This is what it does to Job in the end. It sustains him. He can go on after this, after he says, "I have seen you," right? And then the rabbi also says that tradition says that Moses wrote the Job, and that he wrote it as a. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, you broke up just
Can
for
you
a
hear me
second.
okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, the
Okay.
Talmud
And then he
actually
wrote it as a
discusses.
as like a-
Yeah. So the Talmud discusses who wrote Job and whether Job was a real person. And one of the and there are different opinions. One of the opinions is that it's an allegory, that there never was an actual person like Job. And one of the opinions Rabbi Breidowitz brought is that it was actually written by the book was written by Moses.
Right. Which is really interesting.
which is super interesting in light of his question to God is, "Show me your glory," right? I want to know why I can't understand this, and that's why I think it has to do with the synthesis. This gets into, we're going through Meditations on the Tarot, and he talks about the synthesis of these antinomies, right? Of seeming opposite things, like good and evil, for example. And that's, yeah, anyway.
So Ben says, I believe Job is also an example of how he can allow Satan to hurt us, or he can protect us, and God isn't the one doing harm usually. I have to say, I completely disagree. I think that Job is actually telling us, you know what, all of the things, Satan is also God's creature. That in fact, we have to know that good or bad, that which happens is the will of the one God, and we have to learn our lessons from the bad. We have to learn our lessons from the good. We have to choose life, and we have to have that faith that ultimately all the things that happen that are bad are things which are things which God has given for our good. Chad, you're putting this in the private chat so nobody can see it. I'm going to read it. Hopefully you're fine with that.
Yeah,
But,
I just didn't want to step on you while you were talking.
You can put it into the whole chat, I believe. I don't know, into the YouTube chat. But so then I'll be able to display it for people. But thank God for the seemingly good as well as the seemingly bad, and that's the whole thing, right? We see things as good versus bad, and there's a necessity for that, right? If we understood. Yosef told me that Rabbi Sachs said this, and I believe Yosef, but I couldn't find the actual place. But Rabbi Sachs said, if you could understand it, then theodicy wouldn't be theodicy, right? That's the point. The point is we can't understand it, right? And that needs to be so, because no man can see God's face and live. No, if you were able to see how everything comes directly from God, you would no longer. So this is an allusion. I believe it's made in Tanya, right? And it says, like, imagine if no, this was something somebody taught me in explaining something in Tanya. But imagine if your father was with you at all times, right? You would act better than you do when sometimes he's not there, right?
Mhm.
Now imagine that Moses in all his glory, right, was standing next to you at all times. How capable would you be of doing half of the stupid things that you do, right? Now imagine the vision of Ezekiel, right? That chariot with the seraphim, right? And the everything, like, imagine that was standing over you, right? How would you ever sin? And then imagine if we could see the face of God, you would cease to be yourself. You would become completely nullified to
Right.
God, right? And that's what it means. No man can see God's face and live. And so we live in this time where there is this veil protecting us so that we have a choice, so that we can, in fact, in the future, when the dawn comes, right? We are living at a time of darkness, and it's funny, actually. There are Kabbalists who say that that's why the Earth is round, is so that the sun never goes away. It's always there, right? But
Mhm.
we're at night, we're just turned on the other side, and we don't see it, right?
Mhm.
And at night, we have to have faith, lahagid baboker chastecha ve'emunatcha b'leilot, to proclaim in the morning your loving kindness and your faith at night. Loving kindness by day, when we can see things that are clear and good, and by night having faith, right? Am I making any sense?
Yeah. Well, I want to read this because this is right after. So Job is tried twice. So first his all his businesses and possessions, and then his family are taken away, and then secondly, he's struck with a sickness. So
Mhm.
between that, God and Satan talk again, and God says to Satan, he says the same words that he said before. He says, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil. He still holds fast to his integrity, although you incited me against him to destroy him without reason." I think that's a wild answer for God to give, because he says, you incited me against him without a reason. So like, Satan's reason was, or his assumption was, that Job is going to curse you. So now that Job hasn't cursed him, there's no reason for the suffering. There's no, even to God, God's like, there's no purpose for this. What did you do?
What verse is that? I want to look up the Hebrew.
Yeah, I would be interested in that. It's chapter 2, verse 3 through just 3. But
yeah, okay.
But that's important for me, because I think especially for us modern people, when we think of things mechanistically, we think that God's going to be like, all right, I got to break a few bones in order to make this good thing happen. So let's get let's get to crushing skulls, and then he starts smashing things like that. And then he's just like, well, now that the bones are broken, now I can do this other thing that I was planning on doing. Like, God's not doing that cause and effect thing. There's something kind of deeper going on, where the suffering in itself, like in its essence, has no meaning. It's sort of inherent in the disaster, is there's no purpose for it. And then, but then, like, all things God uses for his good. So it's like nothing's wasted because of this is turned about. God's not like, oh no, what do I do now? This is just a big mess. He's like, I'm going to use this, and actually something better is going to come out of it. So it's like the I forget the name of it, but it's the Japanese art of taking a broken piece of pottery and putting it back together with gold. And so you gild the edges, and actually the end product is more glorious than it was in its unbroken state. And so this is, and I think God's insistence at the very end to speak of everything in terms of creation, not only just in terms of creation, but in birth, of laying the pillars and the foundation of bringing things into being. That this is kind of like my thesis, which I just want to hit every single time I talk, which is that this is how God creates. Like, this is how God is creating the world and how he continues to create. And this is how everything came into being to begin with.
It's how we create too, by the way.
Yeah. And it's how we're made into, and this is what God's primarily concerned with, that we become real beings, that we're not hallucinations, that we're not a puppet or an imagination. And Tolkien has that book, the Silmarillion, where the first, I think it's just like the prelude before the book begins, but it's about, I forget the names of the gods and stuff, but the creator God is creating the universe, and it's an orchestra, and he starts conducting, and everything's playing its part, and these rich melodies are made, and then there's the one that comes in to disrupt the music. So he comes in with this discordant note and noise, but being the master conductor, he directs everyone, and then that gets wrapped up in a new, even more glorious song. That discord was, because it got inserted, actually enhanced the song because of the way the conductor
reacted to it. So this is very much the Jewish teaching. So Ben says it's hard to be thankful for trials and testing. Yeah, for sure. The hardest blessing to say, and I mean, this is something people talk about a lot. You're supposed to say the blessing Baruch Dayan Emet, which is the blessing you say when you hear that somebody close to you died, which is blessed be the true judge. You're supposed to say that with joy. And like everybody's question is, how do you say that with joy? And so the idea, right, is that, so God gave us free will, right? And we have a choice. And in response to our choices, right, God creates things to help move us towards where we should be. That's the idea of your rod and your staff, right? God is guiding us along this thing, with good when possible and with bad when necessary, right? And I'm not saying there's no difference between good and bad. There is a difference, right? So Rabbi Akiva said, Kol derachmana avid letav avid, right? Everything that the merciful created, he created for the good. There are things which are good, and there are things which are for the good, right? Right. and that
Leviathan.
which, yeah, exactly, and the things
Fire.
which the Kabbalists say God throws over his back, right? The things which God gives from the other, right? He gives through the there are things God gives us by handing to us with a kind face and smile, a smile, and there are things he throws over his back to us, right? And that's the idea there. Go ahead, Chad. You want to say something?
Oh yeah, I was just saying, like, that's what, like, fire. So, like, just to build a fire, something must be kind of seemingly destroyed, you know. And it takes all the, if you want to talk about it from a materials point of view. So you have, you have oxygen, and then you have wood, and you have heat, and all of those things are kind of destroyed to make, to make a fire. And people use that to cook or to keep warm, and so that's what I mean. Like, everything we do, everything that's ever been created has been created out of things that have been seemingly destroyed. That's it's a pattern. I mean, that's gotta be the pattern of life. That's the mystery of all this. And I don't know. I don't have anything profound to say, that's for sure.
No, that was actually very profound. Okay, so I actually want to read the Hebrew because it is an interesting Hebrew. Job 2:3. Vayomer Hashem el Hasatan, Hasamta libecha el avdi Eov. Have you set your heart to? Have you paid attention to my servant Job? Ki ein kamohu, because there is none like him, ba'aretz, in the land. Ish tam v'yashar, a man who is whole / simple. Tam, right, it can actually mean naive. But it also implies being whole and not having any faults. V'yashar, and straight or upright. Yireh Elohim, who fears God. V'sar merah, and flees from evil. Ve'odenu machzik betumato, and he still holds fast, grabs on to, and this is in the present tense, machzik. It's funny, machzik literally means he causes to grab onto. Betumato, in his, again, naivete or blamelessness, right? V'tasiteni, and you caused me to test him. Tasit, no, this is not to test. This is lasut is to allure. So a mesit is a person who convinces you to move away from God, right? So Deuteronomy 13 talks about the mesit, the people who cause people to move away from God. V'tasiteni, and you caused me to. That's a very weird way of putting it. Tasiteni, bo. I wonder where else tasiteni bo is used. Let me see if I. Oops.
That naivety thing reminds me of. So by the end of the story, he says something like, "I've heard of you, but now," or I've heard of you, but now I've seen you." So that's like a switch from naivety into something else.
So it's used in Job 16, sorry, which is the same. I'm trying to find places where the same thing is used. Jeremiah 38:22. V'hinei kol hanashim asher nish'aru bebeit melech Yehuda mutzaot El Saray Melech Bavel, Vehena Omrot Hasitucha Veyachlu Lacha. They have set upon you. Interesting. Hisitucha. That is slightly different. Yeah, hisitucha. Set upon you. That's how it's translated in Jeremiah. Let me see where else.
What's the other occurrence in Job 32? What?
That was 36:16.
Entice you from the mouth. That's Elihu.
1 Samuel 26. Im Hashem hasitcha has steered you up against me. B. Yarach. Joshua 15:18. She persuaded him. Ehu. Judges 1:14. She persuaded him again. Well, actually, why don't I just see what's the concordance if it says so? The hefil, the causative, they give to make a request to allure. He allureth thee, to instigate, in bad sense with accusative of person.
Well,
Interesting.
it's interesting how God reverses the role on the accuser. The accuser is accusing Job, and then now God accuses the accuser of something.
Yeah, and the interesting part, the end of it, right? Leval o chinam, to literally to swallow him, not to destroy, to swallow. Leval o chinam, and so in the Hebrew we make a difference between chinam and chofesh. So chinam is something that's without reason, out of it comes from Hanan. It comes from to have mercy. Yeah, that makes sense. Gratuitously. That's funny because you could actually translate that
Gratuitously?
to swallow him as a mercy.
To swallow him as a mercy? Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. That's what
Sherry, that's like you're going
My
ding ding
brain
ding ding
is
ding.
going crazy.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so Ben says Bolea surprised me too. Yeah, it's swallow, it's not destroy. Yeah, that's interesting. I think Yashar and Lee are both used for Job to verify the meanings, if both, and to emphasize how upright he was. I'm not sure I understand what you mean.
Had he never
Tom.
experienced
Tom.
mercy?
Say that again?
Had he never experienced mercy, I wonder?
Had Job not experienced mercy unto that point?
Well, here the thing is, like, why did God say swallow? Because this brings me to Leviathan.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking about, Jess.
Because, and then God in his speech at the end talks about kind of the impenetrability of Leviathan. Like, how can you get inside of him? His face is like, it talks about this, and there's a picture. Go ahead, Sherry.
This gets back to the eating and dining under in the tent of. This is actually what the swallowing is. This is
it's protective.
You are swallowed. You're swallowed by, and you're also eating it at the same time.
Yeah,
my
Roman says
'Cause
if
you're
you're
in the
perfect,
skin.
you can't experience mercy.
Right.
Well, there's this drawing, or it's an old icon, and it's from I can't remember the name of the book. This old book that these nuns had put together, but it's got the Father God depicted as a man with a beard up in the corner. He's got a fishing rod, and out from the fishing rod comes the line, and it's going straight down. And along the line are all these portraits of these other men, and it's actually the line of David.
Okay.
And so it's Christian, and at the bottom is Christ on the cross. The bottom of the fish hook is, or the bottom of the cross is a fish hook, and Leviathan is at the bottom of the picture, with the fish hook through his jaw. And so God is using Christ as bait to catch Leviathan, and he descended on the line of David down into.
I
So here's
actually
another
really
thought.
like it.
Here's
Go ahead.
another thought, Jacob. The idea of being swallowed as a mercy. I think that the story of Jonah really embodies that. I mean, it was a mercy to Jonah, but it was also a mercy to Nineveh.
Yeah. Yep.
Mhm.
Definitely. Yeah.
The whole mission was about mercy.
Yep. Yep. Ben says Leviathan is probably symbolic of the evil people in the world, and perhaps they're good. I have to say I think Leviathan more than anything, like I think we're talking about the journey of the soul, right?
Mhm.
So in fact,
Mhm.
I think Job's journey is in a very real sense the journey of the soul. The soul comes into this world, is swallowed in by the materiality, is tested by it, is tortured by it, but in the end comes out perfect and right, and then we end up with that feast, that joyous feast, where the Leviathan, in the feast hall that is the Leviathan, feasting on the Leviathan itself.
Yeah, but that gets to like Job being blameless and upright. There's a way in which Job is complete in the beginning, and that like at the and
well,
God seems to
naive.
always
The word tam, right? Naive.
well, even simple and complete.
Yeah, simple. Yeah.
But he's not.
But
without
it's
the-
starting the transformational process. It's starting the what you're talking about, the journey of the soul. Like God's interested in creation, not some sort of static state, which you then reach and then you're like put on the shelf as like a trophy or something. He's like, and when Sherry and I have been talking about the book of Job, there's ways in which the pressure and these waves keep, billowing and rushing and smashing against Job, and it's because of that pressure and because of those trials that these absolute like diamonds of revelation come to him that eventually lead into the vision of God, the mystical vision of God himself. And that's much better than where he was before. But how you get there is a pain in the ass. it's and this is the wisdom of God at play. And how does he? It's not. He's not a machine. He's not doing calculated risk analysis. He knows what he made and what it's made for. And there's a way in which that's what Job was made for.
So Ben says Job did the sacrifices. That is probably why he was without blemish. Not that Job was perfect, but that he did the Torah right when concerning sacrifices. Roman says Job did the sacrifices for his children in case they had done something wrong. Honestly, I mean, I'm not sure what to say because, yeah, Job sacrifices for his children, which is it's nice, but ultimately you can't do the sacrifices for your children. And yeah, I do believe that somebody who well, I mean, this is the thing. Somebody who sins and repents stands in a place where somebody who has never sinned cannot stand. At the same time, somebody who never sins is in fact doing something great in not sinning, right?
Mhm.
And so I mean, that is the story, I believe, of life, right? So God lets us choose, right? He gives us the choice of good or bad, and if we choose good, great. And if we choose evil, then he gives us chances to repent. And believing in reincarnation, I believe he keeps on doing that until really ultimately very, very few people end up having made the wrong choice eternally.
Well, it's like what
Um,
Job says at the end. He says, "I know that you can do all things, and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted." It's like God will use whatever He has to
You
achieve
can
His
either
purpose.
do it God's way or you can do it God's
Do
way.
it God's way.
Roman says, that said, yes, I think perfection is sometimes used in funny ways in the Bible. If you want to be perfect, go sell your possessions and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Yeah, it's kind of weird. Like, if you're doing it for the treasure in heaven, in a sense, I think you're missing the point. But at the same time, it's like Maimonides says, right? We tell a child, learn your ABCs, we'll give you candy. Of course, the learning of the ABCs is worth so much more than the candy ever will be, but that child doesn't get it yet, but he will. Right? But we can
Thank you,
assume
guys.
that Job also did sacrifices for himself. Yeah. Go ahead, Chad.
I love you guys, and I gotta get rolling. But thank you so much. God
Bye,
bless.
Chad. Love you.
Talk to you
Bye,
later,
Chad.
Chad.
Bye.
Bye, Chad. Yeah, the other thing is what's interesting about Job, and even the rabbi said, Job is not Jewish.
Right.
So Job is the everyman.
Right.
He's
Well,
not represented
again,
as
I
Jewish.
I have to do my little rant. The idea that God didn't care about the Gentiles at any time, like, I'm sorry. This is just so. I met somebody. Believe it or not, I went to a Mormon church on Sunday,
Oh,
and I
wow.
met somebody. And honestly, like afterwards, he came to my office and we sat and talked for hours, and like he's become like my little brother. On like I feel like he's my little brother, and part of it was we started talking, and he brought up this idea of adoption, and I went on my little rant of like, what are you saying? Like, if the Gentiles are adopted, who was their father before? Like, what family did they belong to before? Right? The whole concept that like the Gentiles are adopted children of God is just so foreign to everything that's Jewish. It gets me mad, and I started calling him little brother, and I still call him my little brother, because like, yes, it says Beni Bechori Israel. Israel is my firstborn son. Yes, and that, I am very grateful. But at the same time, if you're the firstborn son, and this is the joke my friend started making. He's like, well, my brother was adopted, then we got him back, and and I'm like, yeah, it's like, yeah, the Gentiles were adopted, but then we got them back.
That's funny.
But that, I mean, what would a Jacob stream be without me ranting against Paul?
Oh, that's
Romans.
that was really,
Yeah.
that was awesome, Jacob. That was really great.
Yeah, that is great.
Because
I heard in church growing up, like all the time, pastors would say, we've been grafted in. We're, because Paul does use that.
Yeah, he does, and it's like it's absolutely disgusting and offensive and polytheistic. It is. It's polytheistic. How can you possibly say that? Who was your father before?
Well, maybe he's speaking to polytheists.
Well, apparently, but his answer should be, no. There's only one God. He's your father. The same. There's only one creator. Like this idea that, like,
well, that's why I think Job being written by Moses is so interesting, because Moses writes it about someone who's not explicitly from the tribe of Israel,
and Jonah and the rest of the Bible, like this whole the idea, like this is where I get my idea that Paul never read the Hebrew Bible. I'm sorry, I can't see how he possibly read any significant portion of the thing.
Didn't he write Hebrews? I think there was someone else, though.
There are people who say he wrote the book of Hebrews.
At least influenced it. It might have been written by a woman, though.
There are people who try to say that it was written.
I think the woke people want that to be true.
Yeah. Did you want to say
trans
something?
woman
Sherry?
wrote it.
I have a joke. I got a joke for you. I heard from an Orthodox priest today. He said he doesn't like cats, and then he said that a bishop was reminding him. He said cats used to be worshipped in Egypt, and they still remember that.
It's very true. Roman says, so many Christians will say metaphorically that people who are not children of God are children of Satan. Yeah, not sure how I'd sell you on that. Yeah, you're not going to sell me on that. And yeah, that doesn't work. Ben says with his tongue stuck out, did we talk about the Trinity yet? And I'm grafted in. But I don't believe in this whole grafting thing, but that's me and my take on Paul. So
all right, I got to get going. Thanks, Jacob. That was really good.
Yeah,
my pleasure.
Sign off too. Thank you so much, Jacob.
Bye, Sherry.
I will talk to you guys later.
Bye bye.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay, if anybody else wants to come on to chat, you can, but I am going to pretend to do things useful while we're waiting. I love you too, Chad. Yes, I hand out wrenches and power of incredible potency to people all the time. I also sent you a link. It's Roman.
Hey, Jacob. How are you?
Hey, good. How are you doing?
I'm okay. Uh-oh.
Jacob. How are you? Hey, good. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I got off work a little bit ago and got to talk to my wife. It's good.
You got a what?
I said I got to talk to my wife. Wow. That came out weird. My wife. It was good.
I am very much in favor of speaking to your wife. I think you should do it on a regular basis.
Yep.
I'm assuming you guys live together.
Well, okay. So I lived in the Philippines for like 3 years, because you can stay a little longer when you're married. But I had to leave, and then like they changed all the rules about COVID, so I haven't been able to go back and see her. And then I got this job, and it might be a while before I can go back. And so I'm trying to figure out how to get her over here, which is sort of complicated. So,
with a fiance visa, how long have you been married?
I've been married 3 years. And yeah, it's much easier if you're not married, which is confusing and stupid, but true.
Really?
Yes.
So Jason on the server, his wife's from Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
He might be a good person to talk to about that.
He might be, actually. Is he called Jason on Discord, or is he called something else?
Jarts.
Okay. I'll have to. Oh, Jarvis. I thought you were Jarvis.
No, Jarts, not Jarvis. Jarts. Jartz.
Jartz. Okay. All right. Well, I'll have to find him and ask him about it.
Yes. And I mean, I can try kind of. Yeah, I can try taking a look at what's going on, but I thought if you've been married for 3 years, it shouldn't be that hard to get at least a visa for her.
Well, I hope so. I know that like some kinds of visas are like they don't ever trust Filipinos to ever take tourist visas. They assume they always stay. So I'd have to get her like a real visa, and that takes time. I think it takes usually takes about 6 months. So you know. How are you? What are you doing? What do you want to talk about? You guys are going over the Book of Job?
Yeah, so Sherry and Jess, so Jess has like this intense connection to the Book of Job. Like when he starts talking about it, like he starts crying, and like he does it so passionately that like when he starts crying, like I start crying. And so they've been doing a series, Sherry and Jess, where they've been going through it. And yeah, so sometimes he comes on and asks about the Hebrew. And I don't actually know the book of Job very well. I mean, I've read it. It's not like one of my favorite books. But it's very much one of Jess's favorite books. So
Okay. Well, it's interesting. Is Job written in kind of a funny kind of Hebrew? That was my understanding.
yeah, so it is. It's very poetic, and what Yosef has said is that it's believed that the person who wrote it was trying to write it in an older style.
Ah. Okay.
So there are people who say that it's a very early book. There are people who believe that it was written before Genesis. And then apparently in the Talmud, there's an opinion that it was written by Moses. And then there are the opinions that it was actually written much later, and it's actually one of the later books of the Bible, but was written in a style that was trying to make it look older than it is.
Wow.
Okay.
Like sort of like how what's that book? Like the Mormons books kind of read like King James English.
So
Kinda
that's
like
the thing. Like, especially, I think this may be Bart Ehrman's whole thing is he. So he actually lost his faith because of the question of theodicy, and there is a belief among a lot of people that it's like, oh, these theodicy questions, they're later Jewish theology that came in. They're not original Hebrew beliefs.
I mean,
and I completely disagree, but
Genesis 1:3 is all about theodicy. It's all about, oh, right, you disobeyed God. This is what introduces evil into the world. It's, in fact, are you still there? Did it freeze? It seems like they talk about knowledge, right? Knowledge introduces sin, right? Or sin introduces knowledge. It seems sort of part of the same thing.
Temptation invites sin, which gets you knowledge.
So you think temptation invites sin, which gets you knowledge. Sin. So you think knowledge does come from sin? You think this is the?
I think sin does result in knowledge.
Ah, okay, that seems roughly correct, right? Because the same thing, right? You can't have mercy if you're perfect. You can't get forgiveness if you never sin. And this is But you think this gains you knowledge?
Okay, I have to say I don't think that I don't think that it's better to sin and repent than it is not to have sinned, because there's a reason why God tells us don't sin, choose life, do good.
Well, I desire obedience and not sacrifice, right? But
right, but at the same time, I think that God makes it so that through a loving through a loving repentance of sin, we achieve things which are incredibly important, which would, so what they say in Jewish theology is that it's harder to be Isaac, who was Tzaddik ben Tzaddik, right? That he was a righteous man who was the son of a righteous man, than it is to have been Abraham, who his father was not a righteous man and he was righteous. Because it's kind of like, you know, the story I keep on telling about the man who goes in search of the fruit.
I have never heard this story. I have not heard you say the story.
I tell this story all the time. I guess I'll have to tell it again. So there's a young man who hears about a fruit which is beyond anything he could imagine, right? And so he decides he's going to go in search of this fruit. And he goes to different cities. He finds mystics and hermits, and he crosses mountains, and he crosses rivers and oceans, and he spends his life searching for this fruit.
Mm-hmm.
And after many years, he gets to the tree and finds the fruit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as an old man, he grabs it, he tastes it, and it tastes like nothing he's tasted before. Mm-hmm. And he feels, I made it. This was worth spending my whole life for this fruit. Mm-hmm. And while he's standing there, a little child walks up to the tree, picks a fruit, and starts eating it. Mm-hmm. And he turns to the child and he says, it took my whole life to get here. How did you find this tree so fast? And the child says, I was born here. Now, the question is, like, does the fruit taste as sweet to that child as it does to the man who spent his whole life getting there? And what is that child going to do, right? What is his mission to for the rest of his life, mm-hmm. to make that fruit, taste that much greater? Claire, if you want to come on, you can come on. You have to turn your camera on, so I know it's not one of your minions running the account. But so the idea isn't that it's bad to be born next to the tree. Mm-hmm. It's good to be born next to the tree, but it's also very difficult because now you need to spend your life like improving on that fruit, right? And maybe
on the fruit.
You have to. What are you going to do?
You can't just like sit under the tree like Buddha. You have to actually like make the tree taller. You have to fertilize the tree.
You have to do something, right? Because it's the journey, right? And this is why it's so important that God is infinite, right? God is infinite. He is that place that we will never reach.
Okay. So this brings up an interesting idea for me because so I have a certain sort of thing, thing about what it means for like man to be made in God's image, right? And to me, it seems like there is an image of God in the Bible, and that image is not the ark, but it's on top of the ark, which is the nothing on top of the ark. Because this is sort of like how like Egyptians used to have the same sort of thing. They would put like their idols on it, right? And so to me, it's like that nothing is the potential in people and the potential in God, right? And sort of like that potential needs to exist. That potential for evil and that potential for God's judgment and God's mercy, that potential lets us sort of see more of God, right? And we get to see more of ourselves as we develop.
Did you watch my discussion with Cal?
I'm not exactly sure who Cal is.
So it was I think on Sunday. It was this week.
Okay.
And
okay.
I think it was on Sunday.
I think I was on your show Sunday, but I might not have seen the first part of it.
So my discussion with Cal was 8 days ago.
Okay, I might not
Uh,
have seen
so,
I
yeah, it was 8 days ago, and oh, it was on 4th of July, I believe.
it. Okay, I did watch some of your show on the 4th of July.
So, what I was explaining to him is, so I write G-D.
Mhm.
Now, how is writing G-D different from just writing God if I'm referring to God?
That's an interesting question. I don't know. I thought it was to be polite, but I guess you might be leaving that potential. Is this the idea? You leave an empty space in God?
That's so it's important that the ineffable name, yeah, we call it ineffable, right? But it's important that we actually have something that's just ineffable, right? We have, because it has to be ineffable, right? So the G-D doesn't actually replace the idea of God. It replaces the idea that God himself is ineffable.
So, like, to me, like, the name of God, like, if you take it literally, what they said in the Bible when Moses talks to God, God says, I am, which is not a name. Again, it's the same sort of thing as like what I said about the ark. It's like a blank space where you would put a name, right?
It's not even I am. It's actually in the incomplete. So it's I am becoming that which I am becoming.
Yes.
There is no
I am.
present tense of the verb to be in Hebrew.
Literally, I am my potential, and I won't tell you what the potential is because
No, he does tell, but that's the thing. He does. He says, like, that's the important part. It is important for the Hebrew God to be ineffable. It is actually important for the Hebrew
Right.
God to be ineffable.
if
So-
by his ineffability you're talking about his potential, obviously, right? If you're talking about something else, maybe less obviously. I don't know what you're getting at.
I am kind of, yeah. So Ben says that story reminds me why I wasn't meant to learn Hebrew until later in life. I wouldn't have appreciated it and so forth. I think that's true of all of our lives. But yeah, it is that potential. So another analogy I make is, so you can do arithmetic with constants. You can do algebra with variables, right?
Mhm. Right.
I think it's important that, like, God be like a pointer, a variable, right?
Yes.
Which allows for infinite, right? As opposed to being a constant, being that thing,
Sure.
right? And again, I think this is the Hebrew conception of God. The ineffability of God, having that supposed temple for God, right? Obviously, the temple doesn't contain God.
Mhm.
We have a temple in which the Holy of Holies has an ark where people would put their idols, and it's empty.
Yeah. Right.
And
It's-
that emptiness, right? It's the G-D.
Yeah.
That's the point. It's like a recursive reminder that actually God is ineffable and infinite.
Okay. I'm so, like, if it was like a different word, like, it would be really funny if there was like a language, like if you could imagine.
Bye, Ben.
What's that?
Ben said bye.
Oh, hi, Ben. It would be interesting if it could mean both. Like if you had a language where like the word for like bad was gad, and then, or like the word, yeah, like if you could like just take out one letter and it could be either one or the other, but there's no other word that like a good God could be. There's no gid, there's no gad, there's no ged, there's no, right? There's no good.
It's obvious when we write G-D or L-RD, right? And when I say Hashem, right, I say the name. It's obvious which name I'm referring to, right?
Right.
or I'm deliberately not saying the name, and it's obvious what I'm deliberately not saying, and that itself communicates something about the Hebrew conception of God.
Okay, that makes sense. But it's literally just I am becoming. It is largely the potential. But
Well, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh is so the Tetragrammaton, it's some form of that root to be, but we don't vocalize it, we don't say it. I think an okay translation is capital B being, right? But the Tetragrammaton, like, the whole point of it is for it to be indefinite. So, like, that's the point. It's indefinite.
Right. Exactly. It's the blank line where you would put a name, but it's not a name.
Yeah. And that's why I don't know if you've heard this this definition of so Genesis 1:1. And Christians often find this let's say disconcerting. So it says Bereshit, right, in the beginning. Bara, created, Elohim, God, et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. So et is a what's called a direct object marker in Hebrew, which is it tells you what the it tells you
it's an object marker. They have the same thing in Japanese, I think. They have wo, which goes between the verb and the object.
Okay. I'm not sure if it's exactly the same, but yeah. So it tells you what the object of the verb is. There is a different way of reading, and that is the plain meaning of the sentence. Now, there's a different way of reading it, which is assuming that as opposed to those being object markers, they're the preposition et, which means with, and that as opposed to being something which definitely is possible and happens a lot, especially in the Bible, that you have verb, subject, object, that actually what's going on is something that happens in Hebrew, which is you don't put the pronoun there. And to read it, Bereshit, in the beginning, bara, he created, Elohim, God, et hashamayim, with the heavens, the et haaretz, with the land. And that is a very literal interpretation of Genesis 1:1, which the Kabbalists do use to explain that God is actually ineffable and way beyond the concept of God. And that's why it doesn't use a pronoun. It doesn't say, right, it's just in the beginning, God had to create even the concept of God.
Okay. I'm trying to understand. So the concept of himself?
No, the concept. So God is ineffable, right?
Right.
And how do you talk about the ineffable, right? When I call God ineffable, I just as if that's actually a description of him.
So
that's already so God had to create the possibility of there being some way of us grasping him.
God had to put a pointer to himself. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. And so this is the idea that all things, right? And so we talk about God in analogies, like we were talking about God's front and God's back, right? And in a similar way, a rabbi gave this analogy, and I loved it so much. He said, you look at the leg of a chair. If I tell you about the leg of a chair or the leg of a table, right, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right?
Right.
In some manner, the leg of that chair is like my leg or an animal's leg, or of the table. And so we can understand something about that chair by referring to its leg, right? And so in a similar manner, when it talks about God's legs in the Bible, right? So obviously the leg of the chair is not in any way the fullness of my leg or your leg or an animal's leg with all the things that it can do, right?
Right.
And so that itself is an analogy of how we can understand the idea of God's legs or hands or whatever, right? It doesn't mean that God has a hand like my hand, right? It means that there is something about God that is analogous to my hand in a similar way of in a similar way as the leg of a chair or the arm of a chair is analogous to my leg or my hand.
Okay. Okay, there's a bunch of things going on there. So so in the Bible, it seems like they say a lot of things about God that seem maybe a little more literal that way. Like doesn't God walk through the garden? Isn't this a thing that happens? Yeah. And so now in my head, he projected himself into some sort of theophany, and that theophany walked through the garden, and maybe not. I don't know. But is there a better explanation of this? Is there
the walk through the garden? Well, first of all, I have to say, I mean, imagine what does it mean for God to speak? Right? It says
that is a
God
good question.
spoke.
So
what does it mean for God to speak?
Right? Because he doesn't have. It's hard to imagine like if I move around my tongue in my mouth and make noises, it does not create the universe, right? And so it doesn't create the universe in the same way God creates the universe. In some ways, I suppose I am doing the universe. But it doesn't cause things to come into being in the same way. It doesn't seem that way anyway. Do you think it does?
I mean, obviously God doesn't speak the way we speak, right? When he was creating the world, he wasn't making sound waves so all of these things are obviously metaphors and analogies, but how else could we possibly understand anything but God, about God, without these types of analogies and metaphors? And that's what we do. I mean, if I think you should watch the Vervaeke speech he gave. I think it was at Cambridge, but it's on his channel.
I'm thinking very hard about this, and you're right. Like obviously you couldn't, not because of anything, it's just literally the universe early on, right? There's no air for the sound to move through, right? Even if you wanted to speak, how does that work? No, you're right. I just never thought about that. That's a good question. So God speaks. This means something. When I think about, metaphorically speaking, I think about thoughts. Does God have thoughts? Probably not how I have thoughts. Probably
it mentions a lot. So God actually says, "My thoughts are not your thoughts." Right? That's in Isaiah, right? My thoughts are not your thoughts. Where was that in Isaiah? My thoughts are not your thoughts. That's Isaiah 55:8. Let's pull that up. Isaiah so God says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are my ways your ways," said Havaya, right? The Tetragrammaton. So, yeah, I mean, the Kabbalists do explain that a thought is when something forms within you, and then speech is when you externalize that, right?
Yeah.
So God thought, right? And then, so something formed in a sense within God, and then he spoke, he externalized it and created the world, right? And then God acts within the world, and that's God walking in the, or God's spirit merachefet, right? Hovering over the waters, right? So that's what we mean. I mean, there are metaphorical explanations for these things, and we can only understand them by slight analogies which fit in our tiny minds.
We can. I mean, let me think. You need to get that. No. Okay. All right. So we can't conceive of God, or we can't conceive of God correctly. We end up conceiving of God as like an image.
Whatever we say
right?
about God is ultimately going to be false.
Is that true about everything, though?
Yes. Even
No.
even calling God by his name is in fact failing to capture God. That's why we don't say his name. It's ineffable. It's impossible.
Right. And that's why it's not a name. But okay. But
and
you're
even
supposed to-
a name
but you're
is
still supposed to
external
try,
you.
right?
You're
You're
not
still
you're
supposed
not
to
your
love-
name.
What's up?
You're
Right.
you're
That's true.
you are not your name. God is not even one of his names. And yes, we are supposed to aim at the infinite, right? And it says v'shavta ad Hashem Elokecha, right? It says you shall literally repent, but literally return to ad, right? And so in Hebrew, there's ad va'ad bechlal, ad va'ad lo bechlal. To and including, or to and not including, right? So I say 1 to 10, right? 1 to 10, does that include 10 or doesn't include 10? And one of the things that the mystics say is, it says you shall return to the Lord your God, ad va'ad bechlal, including your God, right? Your return, because what does it say? It says God breathed your soul into you, right? So what does it mean for God to breathe, right? Just as when you breathe out, right, you go, something from deep within you is externalized into something fleeting, right? In a similar way, when God breathed our souls into us, something internal, manda napach mitoche napach, the one who breathed deeply, something from internal to him came out of him, and in a fleeting way. And that's what we are. We are made in the image of God. And that's why the background to my thing, that's the background to I think you've seen the background before.
I have seen the background. Yeah, there's lots of. So I guess my first thought was this is like, oh, when you put air into something, like even when you like put air into bread, right? It makes it rise and then fill up with nothing, right? And this is sort of my thought, that it's the nothing. It's God putting the nothing in us, which is the potential.
Yeah,
but
I would agree with that.
But man, this is so like weird, because it seems like, okay, the things we talk about with God are a metaphor. We can't really talk about God because we'll fail. But it says to love your God with all your mind, right? So it's not enough to to love God with all your heart. You have to love him with all your mind. So you have to try to wrap yourself around God, and you can't because you're not as big as God. And
so there's this ritual in Judaism where we and my dad takes it too literally, and so there's this ritual where we jump up where there's a blessing on the new moon, and one of the things is we jump up and we say, just as we cannot touch the moon, right? We can reach and not touch the moon. We cannot reach you. And my dad's whole thing is like, but man landed on the moon. And it's like, Dad, you're not getting it. Right? It's like,
yeah.
It's not that literal. It's an idea of we reach towards God and he is the infinite.
Yeah. Well, it seems like if you have the right idea, that's totally correct. If your idea is that, like it's like if your baby, right, tried to hug you, right, it can't hug you, it can't get its arms around you. It doesn't matter. Nobody cares. Nobody cares that the baby can't hug you. It's amazing that the baby even tried. It's like wonderful, right? And that seems to be what's going on. It's like, oh, you don't understand God. It's cool, man. God loves you anyway. God appreciates it, right? Even if you're totally wrong.
Yeah. A little toddler comes in and hugs your leg, and it's like, it's perfect,
right? Even though it's not perfect. Yeah. This is what I was trying to get at with like the Bible using perfect in like really funny ways. Like people talk about Jesus and they're like, oh, he's perfect, he must have never sinned. And I'm like, Jesus is really weird, right? If you you just honor the fact that he's really weird. He there's like the one event where he's supposed to wash his hands before he goes to the temple. He doesn't wash his hands. He there's a lot of just weird things. I'm sure he had a good reason or whatever, or he thought he did.
Actually, really, so the washing hands thing is one of my I'm gonna do what Claire wants me to do and speak harshly to Christians and hate them the way she wants she wants me to hate you.
Okay, sure.
It's actually not that Jesus doesn't wash his hands. It's the people he's around don't wash their hands before they eat. And people come and criticize him and they're like, why do your followers not wash your hands? And the funny thing is that Christians, and for me, this is one of the obvious things which show that why Judaism is true and Christianity is false. Mm-hmm. So the Romans thought the Jews were this fastidious, crazy people who wouldn't work 7 days a week because they were lazy and they were constantly washing their hands and worried about purity, and it was crazy and stupid, right? And so one of the things that the rabbis decreed was that, in fact, all people should wash their hands, right? Mm-hmm. And this is one of the things that Christians for thousands of years before they eat, and this was one of the things that Christians for thousands of years were see, the Jews have this tradition. God didn't tell them to wash their hands. They are constantly washing their hands and having we would do so for us baptism isn't a one-time thing. It's something we do on at least a monthly basis, certainly for women, but also for men, right? And so the Christian thing was, look at these silly Jews with their fastidiousness and washing their hands and stuff, to the point where it made it into the Christian Bible that look at these Jews with their silly, you have to wash your hands all the time, right? And thousands of years later, we see who was right.
It's a pretty good idea. Washing your hands is pretty nice.
And bathing at least once a week.
It's a good idea.
Now that we understand germ theory and everything that goes along with it, nobody's going to be like, yeah, washing your hands before you eat is like, and it's funny to me also the same thing with the Sabbath thing, like, it's become a totally secular thing. Like, even secular Jews and some Gentiles have started shutting off their phones one day a week, because they're like, the Orthodox Jews have it right. Like, one day a week, you can't, you can't turn your phone on, you can't answer the phone, you can't call anyone, you can't write, you can't use the computer. And like, they're starting to see, and this was, I mean, when electricity first started being used a lot 100 years ago, it was a very controversial thing in Judaism, including in Orthodox Judaism, whether or not it was fine, right? And people for a very long time really made fun of, oh, you won't open the refrigerator door because the light turns on, and you won't turn on and off lights, and you won't, how silly is that? How, like, and now there are people who are not Jewish at all, who are like, you know what? That's a really good idea. So, and for me, this is part of, like, this is God's direction. This is why I know Judaism's true and Christianity's false, is because for thousands of years we were washing our hands and Christians were making fun of us.
Is that a, I don't, would that be the thing for me? You would think, right? Like, well, it's the same sort of thing that, like, you would talk about, right? Like, if you try to criticize the Old Testament, like, what are you doing? What's going on? Doesn't
you're cutting off the branch. You're cutting off the branch you're sitting on, because like the New Testament, it's all built on the Old Testament. So like attacking Judaism, qua Judaism, that's why modern, like, they're like, oh no, the Judaism we have today isn't original Judaism. And so Christians have had this supersessionism, or they're like, yeah, we actually were the heirs of actual Judaism, right? And that's why Marcionism is a heresy. But ultimately, I have, for me, the thing I think is the most clear is when Paul says, did you listen to my discussion with Jeff yesterday?
I know I've seen some discussions with Jeff. I do not.
No, I've only had one discussion with Jeff. Oh, you're wrong, Jeff. Sam's father, Jeff, that I had yesterday.
I did see him. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this was my thing about, like, the light of Moses behind the veil, and seeing through a glass darkly. Like, Paul has it exactly backwards. Right? It's the people who came from paganism who needed Christianity to introduce them to Judaism to the point where they could accept Jewish teachings, as opposed to us Jews being blind. Like, in a sense, we're blind. We're blinded by the light that, like, and really, I would say Christianity is the light seen through a glass darkly. Like, Paul's teachings helped it make it palatable and acceptable to Christians enough so that they also started understanding Jewish concepts. And after they got a little accustomed to the light, now we are getting to the point where I believe Christianity is going to unravel. And I was talking to somebody about how poetic it is that the purpose of Christianity is to die, right? I believe.
Well, of course, the purpose of Christianity is to die. Not because, like, I don't know, it's not right necessarily, right? But like if the Messiah comes and he's Jesus, then even Christianity,
Well,
like what it wouldn't work the same way, right? It would be totally different. But
well,
also,
I think Christianity actually needs to die so that people can see, like, can see through that veil on Moses' face. Because so what Paul says is, we are not like Moses, and I'm like, how dare you? Like, he's saying it as if it's a good thing. He says, we are not like Moses, who wore a veil to hide the fading of the light. Because in the Bible it says that when Moses came down from the mountain, right, the light was so much that he had to wear a veil over his face because people could not stand the light on his face. It's like, no, you have it exactly backwards. It's not that he was hiding the fading of the light. He was hiding the light that was too much for us to withstand. And that's what I believe the veil that is Christianity is, Christianity is that those sunglasses you need because the light of the Torah is too much.
this seems a little strange, even for what you say you believe, because you've done the opposite with like Mormonism. You were like, the Mormons have like this pretty good thing going, and they do. It's actually kind of frustrating, but they do. They have like very nice families. They really love each other. They've got
Have you heard my joke? Have you heard my joke?
Yeah. I've heard the joke. I think it's a good joke. And to me, right, I get something a little different out of that. But to me, like, if you're like, hey man, no, these Mormons have something good going, this secularism thing actually much more poisonous and bad, right? And so to me, like, oh, but Christianity has to die, even though like at the minute someone becomes not a Christian anymore, like, okay, they've got Buddhism on this side and they've got atheism on the other side. Judaism isn't really on the map, right? And again, maybe it'll happen, but
no. So that's the thing. That's the thing. So okay, so you need to watch my conversation with Antonio. Did you watch my conversation with Antonio?
I'm sure you didn't. I probably have seen parts of it, but I probably haven't.
Okay, so Antonio is this thing that existed 2,000 years ago, and suddenly 50 years ago, just 50 years ago, there were 0 Noachites. Our best guess now is there are 100,000 Noachites, which are people who are Gentiles who believe in Judaism, but don't want to be Jews. They don't want to keep kosher. They don't want to, and that's fine, because Judaism doesn't require that of Gentiles. You can be a Gentile who believes in Judaism, believes that the God of Israel is the one God and that Judaism is true. And it has to be that way in order for Israel to be a nation of priests, because you can't have a nation of priests if everybody is a priest. Then it's no longer priests, right? So, and there's the verse in Zechariah which says that 10 men from each language will grab the corner of the hem of a Jew and say, let us go with you, because we have heard God is with you, all of you. It's plural you, right? And that is what I believe is coming true and will come true, is that the Gentiles will be like, oh, you know what? The Jews were right all along. And I think, and Maimonides said this almost 1,000 years ago. He said the reason Christianity and Islam exist is so that they will spread Jewish ideas all around the world.
Okay, this brings up another thing. Okay, so I don't know what's going on with this lady. I don't know if she's like a weird fed or whatever you think she is. But like, okay, so okay, you're like, all right, Christians are idolaters. We love Jesus too much. We think he's a god or whatever. Okay, sure. Okay, fine. So what about this Islam thing? And to me, like, okay, like if she's like trying to sell you on Islam, like I don't know what Islam has to.
She's not
Yeah.
actually trying to sell you on Islam.
I know. It's like this weird
So-
atheism Islam
so-
thing. I know it's stupid.
Yeah,
But
it's-
listen, okay.
Yeah.
So
okay. Forget Claire. Let's talk about Islam.
Okay, so like, but to me, like, okay, if you can be Jewish, and there's this Islam thing, and it seems like, okay, they're not idolaters. They believe in one God. We think. They say, I don't have any reason to doubt them on this. What's so bad? Is Islam Noahide, or is Islam not Noahide?
Well, okay. Islam theoretically is Noahide. So, but Christianity is theoretically Noahide, right?
Mhm.
But I think there needed to be kind of these two wings so that Judaism could fly. Because if it was just Christianity and Judaism, if there wasn't Islam to kind of show the mistakes of Christianity and Christianity to show the mistakes of Islam, then you wouldn't have a necessary dialectic that when the Messiah comes, the Christians and Muslims are going to both see what was wrong, right? Because Islam has some of Jewish truths in it, and Christianity has some of the Jewish truths in it. But both of them are mistaken.
Mhm.
They share some of their mistakes, and so the monotheism that Christianity is missing is in Islam, and there's a lot that's wrong with Islam. That's not just conceptual. It's actually more in practice. The problem with Islam is not necessarily the ideas, but how it is in fact put into practice. And I think almost the opposite is true of Christianity. When it's put into practice, including by Mormons, like Mormons are the annoyingly nice and good people, right? But like and I actually have a Book of Mormon here. Their beliefs are all bunk, and like they actually believe God has a physical body, like God the Father has a physical body.
They think he was literally a person who had literal children, and Adam had literal children, and Adam is somehow sort of the god of this planet who got to have all these kids.
Right.
And this is what proves his goodness, because he had
there is so much wrong in the theory of Mormons, but they're nice people.
Yeah.
They're really, really nice people.
That's what I get out of Mormon. It's like a little bit different than your take. It's like, oh, all this fight about theology and all this like disintegration into all these weird little sects. And it's like, oh, right. And what did Joseph Smith pray for? Oh, he prayed for the right sect. And what is this? Oh, it's totally wrong. It's total bullshit, but it's beautiful. But yet the people come out with real loving hearts that really love God and who really love their families. And I mean, that's what you're supposed to do. I don't think it's so much about the
right. But this is why again, for me, it's become so literal that God created Mormons so that Christians would understand how Jews feel. Because this is one of the things that we as Jews have been telling to Christians for thousands of years is stop focusing so much as you do on your supposed theories and actually put into practice. And again, I think there are imperfections in all of the things, and I think ultimately, like Hinduism and Buddhism and everything, because God loves all his children and he's revealed bits of the truth to everyone, right? But Beni Bechori Israel is God's firstborn child, and the revelation at Mount Sinai is the most pure revelation because it was from the ineffable God himself.
Well, I mean, I don't. So, like, doesn't everybody say in some way that their revelation came from God himself? Like,
so one of
Christians
the things
right?
Well, eh, so one of the things that we believe, and this is Rabbi David Gottlieb, who's this rather well-known rabbi I studied under when I was in Israel. He calls this the Kuzari principle because it's brought in a book that only anti-Semites have heard of called the Kuzari. It's funny, but Maimonides talks about it too, which is that in Judaism we have a national revelation at Sinai, right? Mm-hmm. The idea is not that Moses went and heard that Moses heard from God, but at least for the 10 Commandments, mm-hmm. we as a nation stood before mm-hmm. God on the mountain, and our eyes saw the voices, right? It actually says they saw the voices, right? And for us, that's really important because it was a miraculous revelation which completely, like, so there are all these psalms about how, like, the Malacha Hayam Kitanus, what's wrong with you, sea, that you're turning back, or waters that you're turning back, right? Or mm-hmm. Kol Hashem Shover Arazim, right? The voice of God shatters the cedars, right? Because the revelation at Sinai was so miraculous, because it was God saying Anochi, right? I am the Lord your God. And actually, what it's the there are Jewish midrashim which say that at every word, everybody died and had to be resurrected. And that's what they meant when they said to Moses, we cannot stand this, right? It's too much for us. You go listen to the rest and bring it back, right? Mm-hmm. Because it was that pure of a revelation. And the importance of it is that it was a national revelation like that. It wasn't individuals.
Oh God, I've got to make notes. Okay, so all right. So the thing about individual revelation, and this also comes back to God speaking, right? So so this is interesting because one of the things I think about, because in Christianity, right, this is about salvation, right? This is about, oh man, if you don't get your shit right with God, right, you're screwed, right? And so I think about, like, what this means, right? And so what the New Testament says, it quotes the Old Testament. It says Abraham believed God and it was accounted to him for righteousness. And so of course Christianity gets onto all these beliefs, and it's a little weird, but
this is Paul, by the way. Go ahead.
Yeah. I know, but it's also, it's quoting the Genesis. Okay, like, come on. And
I've ranted enough about this. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So so one of the things to think about is that there's a story with the Buddha, and the Buddha goes and he's sitting under the tree and becomes enlightened, and he's thinking about it. He's like, yeah, I'm enlightened and it's pretty sweet, but I can't get all these other people enlightened. There's no way. They can't understand it. No one could possibly do it. And then Brahma shows up, and Brahma means the creator, which is as good a name for God as any name I've heard of. And he shows up and he says, no, really, you need to go tell people about this enlightenment thing. It's really sweet. And I think about this and I wonder, did Buddha believe God, and was it accounted for him for righteousness? And I don't know. I have no idea. But it's something I think about. But you're saying that, okay, maybe this thing can save one Christian, and Christianity can be saved with this. And maybe one Buddhist can be saved in Buddhism. But you're saying that, like, Judaism is the thing that can save the whole nation. That's what I hear.
So the covenant of Noah, it's actually very easy to arrive at the covenant of Noah without necessarily knowing that it is part of the Torah and comes out of Judaism.
So the blood thing is
By the
not
way, I do
obvious.
have to go. Like,
Okay. Okay. If
yeah.
you really got to leave, you got to leave.
I do. Let me just finish this one thing. But so I do believe that there are certainly people in all the religions who are in fact living up to the Noahide laws, and God accounts things as righteousness because God knows how you were made. He knows what's inside your heart. He knows exactly what you had a capacity to do, what you didn't have a capacity to do, and his justice is actually infinite and individual. So this idea of a binary, you're either going to hell or you're going to heaven, right? That's the cognitive distortion of splitting. That's not truth and reality. A God who is infinitely good, right, and infinitely just, gives to each according to his righteousness, and punishes the wicked according to their wickedness, right? It's not this weird thing like that Paul talks about, like anybody who gets, who breaks one law, it's as if he broke it all. But what it does also say to Abraham, after it says it was accounted to him as righteousness, after he takes his son onto the mountain, it says, now I know that you believe in me.
Yes. Beliefs need to manifest as action. The only thing, oh God, do you want to keep talking about this?
No, I have to go.
Probably need to leave. Okay, we can talk about this later if you want.
Okay.
Bye. Have a good day.
We'll talk later. Bye.